Welcome to another deep dive, everybody. Today, we're going to be looking at JFK through a kind of a British lens, if you will.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I got a stack of excerpts here from the July 2006 issue of the Dealey Plaza Echo, which is a British research journal.
Really?
Yeah, published by a group over in the UK that they're dedicated to uncovering what really happened in Dallas.
Okay.
So this issue is particularly interesting because it really focuses on a couple of key figures, Jim Garrison
Okay.
and Clay Shaw.
Right.
Yeah, those names should ring a bell.
They do.
They're central to some of the alternative theories about the assassination.
Yeah.
Right? So Garrison, for those who need a quick reminder, he was the New Orleans district attorney that went after Clay Shaw for conspiracy to murder JFK.
Right.
So this article, The Persecution of Jim Garrison, it kind of picks up where the last one left off and digs deep into Shaw's background, particularly his alleged ties to the CIA.
It really goes beyond what the Warren Commission looked at.
Yeah.
I mean, the article highlights Shaw's wartime work in intelligence, so we're talking even before the CIA was officially formed. But what's really interesting is that even today, his military records are still classified.
Still classified, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
What are they hiding?
What are they hiding?
Yeah.
Exactly, what are they hiding? And then the article also dives into Shaw's role as the director of the International Trade Mart in New Orleans,
Okay.
suggesting possible links to anti-Castro activities.
Right.
And you guessed it, the CIA.
Yeah, there's a lot of intriguing details there.
Yeah.
I mean, for instance, the Cuban consulate in New Orleans had an office right there in the Trade Mart.
Oh, really?
And the former consul's widow even claimed she'd seen Oswald distributing leaflets outside the Trade Mart
Wow.
and even walking through the lobby. And then you've got William Godet, a former agent who placed Oswald at the Trade Mart, talking with Guy Bannister,
Oh, right, yeah.
who was a former FBI agent
Yeah.
heavily involved in anti-Castro operations.
Yeah, so you see all these connections to all these.
It's like this web that just starts forming around Shaw, the Trade Mart, and all these figures linked to intelligence and the anti-Castro movement.
Yeah, so we're seeing a pattern here.
Right.
Shaw keeps popping up in proximity to all these shady figures.
Yeah.
And then the article kind of gets into this whole alias thing, Clay Bertrand,
Right.
and examines these claims that Clay Bertrand would send clients to an attorney named Dean Andrews.
Okay.
And then, get this, the article actually connects Andrews to Shaw
Wow.
through Gordon Novel,
Interesting.
who is an electronics expert suspected of working for the CIA. They found that connection through a business proposal that Novel made to Shaw.
Really?
Yeah. Novel had been involved in that munitions bunker burglary.
Oh, right. Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
Where they were storing all the stuff for the anti-Castro operations in Cuba. But later, he visited Shaw at the Trade Mart about a completely different business venture and mentioned that the proposal was drawn up by his attorney, Dean Andrews.
Okay, so this is where
So you go, there's your link.
the link comes in.
Yeah.
So you've got that connection to Shaw and Andrews, and Andrews was positive that Clay Bertrand
Right.
was the guy, involved
Okay. There's that indirect link.
in the assassination.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The article then goes on to highlight Shaw's position on the board of the Centro Mondo Commerciale in Rome,
Oh, yeah.
which was an affiliate of Permindex, a company suspected of having CIA ties and being involved in covert operations.
Yeah, and you know what's interesting about that?
What's that?
The Italian government actually kicked out the Centromondo Commerciale in 1962
Wow.
for subversive activities. And they did the same thing with Permindex the year before.
Interesting.
So these weren't just innocent business ventures. We're talking about organizations that
No.
were operating.
Yeah, espionage. Yeah, in that world of espionage.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So the article then goes on to analyze some recently declassified CIA documents that seem to contradict Shaw's claims of minimal contact with the agency.
Right, yeah.
One memo from 1961 actually states that Shaw introduced General Charles P. Cobell,
Wow.
who was the deputy director of the CIA at the time,
Okay.
at a meeting of the New Orleans Foreign Policy Association. So this was 5 years after Shaw supposedly ended his casual contact with the CIA.
Right.
So they want us to believe that he just had minimal contact. But then here he is introducing the deputy director of the CIA.
Yeah.
Come on.
It really undermines the official story about Shaw's involvement.
Yeah.
And it's the same memo that revealed that a CIA representative had casual encounters with Shaw in restaurants and other public places in New Orleans between 1956 and 1965.
9 years of casual encounters.
9 years.
I don't think that's by chance.
No.
That sounds a lot like meetings where they're exchanging information or instructions.
Yeah.
Right.
And then the article goes on to name that CIA representative. It was Hunter Leak,
Okay.
an agent in the New Orleans office.
Gotcha.
There's even a guy, Alfred Moran,
Okay.
who was a close friend of Leak's,
Right.
who was seen with Shaw at the airport
Right.
in 66.
Right.
And that later, that sighting actually became a big point of contention in Shaw's trial.
Oh, really?
But I think one of the most important pieces of evidence is a 1967 memo from the CIA's Domestic Contact Service.
Okay.
This was the division that was responsible for handling people
Right.
like Shaw,
Right.
who provided information to the agency.
So basically an informant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
The memo reveals that Shaw was assigned a special Y number,
Okay.
which showed that he was a pretty important source.
Yeah.
And it even goes on to say that compromising a Y member was serious enough to warrant disclosing information about Shaw's reports to the FBI.
Oh, wow.
So they really valued this guy, Shaw's contributions.
Right.
It just makes you wonder what kind of information he was giving them.
Yeah.
The article doesn't just stop at official documents, though.
Yeah.
It also brings in some personal accounts and allegations about Shaw's shady dealings.
Okay.
For example, Gordon Novel claimed that Shaw knew people who wanted to buy guns.
Right.
And that he'd even met with Shaw and Lee Harvey Oswald to discuss arms sales.
Wow.
So, again, tying back into that munitions bunker burglary.
Right.
So you got all this, potentially this network supplying weapons for covert operations.
Right. Right.
The article goes on to explore the possibility that Shaw may have used yet another alias
Okay.
besides Clay Bertrand.
Right.
And they tell the story of this guy, Edward Gimmis, who was a prisoner at the time,
Okay.
who claimed to have information about Shaw's aliases.
Really?
Yeah. He alleged that he had been involved in gun running operations with an associate of Jack Ruby's,
Wow.
and that he had even met with Shaw in New Orleans to discuss arms deals.
Wow. Okay.
And he even went so far as to say that Oswald was at one of those meetings and claimed that he, Gimmis, drove Oswald to Cotulla, Texas in September of 63,
Wow.
where they met with a friend of Gimmis's who was a former member of the Mexican Army.
Oh.
And then Oswald and this friend allegedly traveled to Mexico
Wow.
to get Oswald a passport.
Oh, wow.
So this guy's directly linking Shaw and Oswald
Yeah.
in those months leading up to the assassination.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah. And then Gimmis even provided Garrison with a flight plan that listed David Ferry as the pilot
Oh, wow.
and passengers named Lambert, Heidel, and Diaz.
Okay.
He claimed that Lambert was another alias used by Clay Shaw.
Right.
Heidel was Oswald.
Right.
And Diaz was an anti-Castro Cuban.
Okay.
So this flight plan is real. You got a direct connection between Shaw, Oswald, Ferry, and anti-Castro Cubans right before the assassination.
That's amazing.
And then it doesn't stop there. The article also mentions this guy, Donald Norton,
Okay.
who claimed to have worked for the CIA and once collected a briefcase with $50,000 from Clay Shaw and delivered it to Lee Harvey Oswald in Mexico.
Oh, wow.
Norton also claimed to have delivered another $150,000 to David Ferry, which was supposed to be sent on to Cuba.
Wow.
While Norton's claims haven't been confirmed, Garrison's office thought his story was plausible and potentially important to their investigation.
So everyone connected to this case has a story to tell?
I know, right? It's just, it's incredible.
Yeah.
So when Shaw was arrested in 67, they found an address book among his things,
Okay.
and it had some pretty interesting entries in it. One of them listed Lee Odom
Right.
with a P.O. box in Dallas.
Okay.
And guess what? The same P.O. box number, 19106,
Wow.
also shows up in Lee Harvey Oswald's address book.
Wow. Okay.
Shaw's lawyers, they did find a Lee Odom who said he used that P.O. box in Irving, Texas
Okay.
for his barbecue company. But there's some red flags there.
Oh, really?
First, that P.O. box number wasn't in use in Dallas in 1963.
Okay.
So Oswald couldn't have had it then.
Right.
And second, Odom's story about meeting Shaw only once to talk about bloodless bullfights in New Orleans is pretty odd.
That's very strange.
Especially since there's no record of Shaw being involved in anything like that.
Yeah, it feels like a cover-up.
It does. It does. Yeah, just another attempt to cover up a connection between Shaw and Oswald.
Right.
But it's not just about these suspicious connections and potential cover-ups.
Right.
Garrison was also battling an intense media campaign against him and his investigation.
Really?
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
The article argues that these attacks, they weren't just journalists doing their jobs. It was a coordinated effort by intelligence agencies to discredit him and shut down his investigation.
Wow.
And it brings up Carl Bernstein's expose on Operation Mockingbird.
Right.
Which was a CIA program meant to manipulate the media for propaganda. It highlights the involvement of journalists like James Phelan and Hugh Ainsworth, both of whom had ties to intelligence.
Oh, wow.
And were actively working to undermine Garrison. Phelan, for example, wrote this scathing article attacking Perry Russo, who was one of Garrison's key witnesses, accusing him of changing his story and suggesting that Garrison's team had implanted false memories through hypnosis.
Oh, my goodness.
But the article reveals that Phelan was close to both the CIA and the FBI.
Really?
And was actually feeding information about Garrison's investigation to the FBI.
Wow.
And there's evidence that he was working directly with Walter Sheridan.
Oh, okay.
Who was a producer for NBC. Who was creating a biased program to discredit Garrison.
Wow, okay.
And Sheridan and Richard Townley, who was an executive at WDSU, NBC's affiliate in New Orleans, were later indicted by a grand jury in New Orleans on charges of intimidating witnesses and trying to bribe people to disrupt Garrison's investigation.
So they were trying to sabotage the investigation.
They were, yeah.
From the inside.
It seems that way.
Wow.
And Townley had connections to the CIA as well, having been granted security clearance for a covert project back in 1955.
Wow. So deep.
Yeah, so they were using all these connections to really manipulate the narrative around Garrison and his investigation.
Yeah, it's just incredible.
It's incredible. It really makes you wonder what they were so afraid of him uncovering.
Yeah, and this article goes on to detail the attempts to sabotage Garrison from within his own team.
Really?
Yeah, they focus on individuals like William Wood, who used the alias Bill Boxley.
Oh, wow.
Wood was a former agent who volunteered to work on the case, claiming he'd been fired for alcoholism.
Okay.
But Garrison later found out that Boxley was feeding him false leads and even tried to set him up in a compromising situation.
So there were moles within his own team.
It's a crazy story, right?
Yeah.
And then there's another volunteer named William Gurvich who also turned out to be a mole.
Oh, wow.
After disappearing from Garrison's office, he reappeared on that NBC program attacking Garrison.
Yeah.
He admitted to having copied Garrison's master file with all the witness interviews and staff memos, which he then gave to Clay Shaw's lawyers.
It's like something out of a spy movie.
Yeah.
It just seems like all these powerful forces were working against Garrison at every turn.
Exactly. This pattern of infiltration and sabotage really strengthens the argument that someone was trying to stop Garrison from uncovering the truth.
Right.
The article then gets into the questionable tactics used against Garrison during Shaw's trial.
Okay.
Like allegedly doctored audio recordings and the suppression of key witness testimony.
Okay, so they're playing dirty even in court.
Mm-hmm.
What kind of doctored recordings we're talking about?
Well, one example involves a conversation Garrison had with Pershing Gervais, an informant who claimed to know about a plot to kill Kennedy.
Okay.
During the trial, they played a tape recording of this conversation for the jury, and on the tape, Garrison's voice seemed to accept payoffs in exchange for dropping charges against certain people.
So they were trying to make him look corrupt.
Right.
Did it work?
A speech expert testified that the tape had been edited to make it sound like Garrison was taking bribes.
Wow.
They inserted innocent remarks he'd made into the conversation at key points.
Wow.
It was a blatant attempt to discredit him.
It's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
What about the suppressed witness testimony? What happened there?
Well, the article mentions several witnesses who were prevented from testifying, either because they couldn't be found or for their own safety.
Okay.
Jack Martin, for instance, told Garrison he'd seen Shaw, Oswald, and Ferry together at Guy Bannister's office.
Right.
But he was too afraid to testify.
Oh, wow.
And Julia Ann Mercer, who claimed to have seen a car with Jack Ruby in it unloading a man with a rifle near the grassy knoll on the morning of the assassination,
right,
also wasn't called to testify.
It's almost as if someone who was making sure that certain stories never got told.
Right.
It's a pattern we see in so many of these conspiracy theories. Witnesses disappearing, evidence going missing, and a whole lot of unanswered questions.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder what else might be out there, hidden away in some government archive or someone's personal collection.
Right. So what ultimately happened with Garrison's investigation? Did he ever get any real answers?
Well, despite all the obstacles, Garrison managed to bring Shaw to trial in 1969.
Okay.
But with all the evidence that had been suppressed and the intense media campaign against him, it was an uphill battle.
I can't imagine how frustrating that must have been for him.
Absolutely. The trial itself was a media circus with reporters from all over the world descending on New Orleans.
Right.
And in the end, after just over an hour of deliberation, the jury acquitted Shaw on all charges.
Oh, wow. So it was a total defeat for Garrison.
In a legal sense, yes.
Okay.
But the article argues that his investigation, despite its flaws, achieved something very important.
Okay.
It exposed a network of powerful figures connected to the CIA, anti-Castro operations, and organized crime. And it forced people to question the official story of the JFK assassination.
That's a powerful legacy.
Mm-hmm.
Even if he didn't get a conviction, he at least brought all these shadowy figures and their potential motives into the light.
Exactly. And that's why his work continues to fascinate and inspire researchers to this day.
Right.
He opened up a Pandora's box that can never be closed again.
So this Dealey Plaza UK group, they're carrying on that legacy in a way.
Yeah.
The article about Garrison's investigation is just one part of this issue of the Dealey Plaza Echo.
Mm-hmm.
They also included a report on their 2006 Canterbury seminar,
Okay.
which kind of gives us a glimpse into the kind of research they're doing.
It's a fascinating report. It shows the breadth of their work.
Yeah.
They had presentations on everything from the imagery of JFK and Oswald to the role of the military-industrial complex in the assassination.
That's interesting. So they're not just focused on the nuts and bolts of the crime itself.
Right.
They're also looking at the wider political and cultural context.
Exactly. They're trying to understand the assassination on multiple levels, which I think is crucial.
Yeah.
One presentation that particularly caught my eye was by Sherry Gutierrez.
Okay.
She's a bloodstain pattern analysis expert.
Okay.
She gave 2 talks, one on trajectory analysis and another on bloodstain pattern analysis. Both applied to the JFK assassination.
Bloodstain pattern analysis, that's incredibly specific.
It is, but it can be incredibly revealing.
Okay.
By carefully analyzing the bloodstains at a crime scene, you can reconstruct the sequence of events and even determine the position of the victim and the shooter.
So she was using this technique to try and understand what happened in Dealey Plaza.
Exactly. That's fascinating.
Yeah, and it connects back to our earlier discussion of Garrison's investigation and all the disputed details surrounding the assassination.
Right.
The medical evidence, particularly the autopsy results, has always been a major source of controversy in this case.
Right. There are so many conflicting theories about the bullet trajectories and the nature of Kennedy's wounds.
It's one of the biggest mysteries of the assassination.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Gutierrez's work shows how scientific analysis can help us get closer to the truth. Even decades later, there's still so much we can learn from the physical evidence.
So we've got this British research group delving into the medical evidence. We've got Garrison's investigation uncovering this network of shady figures. It's like everyone's trying to piece together this giant puzzle.
It is. It is a giant puzzle. And it's a puzzle with a lot of missing pieces.
Right.
But the article that really grabbed my attention was the one about the acoustics evidence.
Oh, yeah, the acoustics evidence.
That's a fascinating piece.
Yeah.
It focuses on a letter Mike Doretsky wrote to the Justice Department back in 1980.
Okay.
He was challenging their analysis of the acoustics evidence, specifically their dismissal of a sound impulse recorded on a dictabelt police recorder.
Dictabelt?
Yeah, it's an old-fashioned recording device that used a thin plastic belt coated with magnetic material. It was commonly used by police departments in the 1960s.
Oh, okay. So they had a dictabelt recording from Dealey Plaza.
Right.
And there was a sound on it that could have been a gunshot.
That's right. But the Justice Department dismissed it, saying it was just noise.
Okay.
Doretsky argued that their assumption that only one rifle was fired was flawed and biased their conclusions.
Right, okay.
He pointed out that there's no proof that only one rifle was present at the Texas School Book Depository. The possibility of multiple shooters should be considered.
So he was challenging the whole lone gunman theory based on this audio evidence?
He was, and he backed up his argument with a detailed analysis of eyewitness testimony.
Right.
He divided the witnesses into three groups. Those who described 3 closely spaced shots, those who described a double shot or 4 shots with a pause after the first 3, and those whose testimony was too vague to analyze.
So he was using eyewitness accounts to support the idea of more than 3 shots being fired. But aren't eyewitnesses notoriously unreliable?
They can be, but Dvoretsky argued that their accounts, while often dismissed, provide valuable insights into the sequence of events.
Okay.
And he pointed out that many of them described hearing more than 3 shots, which aligns with the acoustic data.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So he's building a case for multiple shooters based on both the audio evidence and eyewitness accounts.
That's right.
That's really interesting.
And he also cites the Zapruder film, which shows 3 events that could be gunshots.
Okay.
He argues that the timing of these events lines up with the acoustic data, including that disputed sound impulse.
So he's using multiple sources of evidence to really challenge the official narrative.
Right.
It's like a detective piecing together clues from different angles.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
And what's really fascinating is that Dvoretsky received a response to his letter from none other than Harold Weisberg, a legendary JFK assassination researcher.
Yeah, I've heard that name. He was one of the most vocal critics of the Warren Commission, wasn't he?
He was. He spent decades researching the assassination,
Right.
meticulously analyzing the evidence and relentlessly pursuing the truth. And in his letter to Dvoretsky, he praises his analysis and agrees with his concerns about the Justice Department's investigation.
So even someone like Weisberg, who had spent years digging into this case, found Dvoretsky's work compelling.
He did. Weisberg was known for his sharp mind and his unwillingness to accept easy answers.
Right.
He was skeptical of everything, especially anything coming from the government.
Right.
And he saw in Dvoretsky's work a kindred spirit, someone who was willing to challenge the official narrative and demand more answers.
So what did Weisberg have to say about the acoustics evidence? Did he think it proved there was a conspiracy?
Well, he was cautious, as always.
Wrong.
He didn't want to jump to conclusions.
Okay.
But he criticized the House Select Committee on Assassinations for assuming all the shots came from one rifle and one window.
Right. That was the conclusion of the Warren Commission, right? That Oswald acted alone, firing all the shots from the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository.
Exactly. And Weisberg thought that assumption had limited the scope of the investigation and prevented them from considering other scenarios.
Right.
He also criticized the FBI's selective approach to interviewing witnesses.
Okay.
They ignored many potential witnesses until years after the assassination.
Wow.
And he accused them of manipulating evidence.
Manipulating evidence. How so?
Well, he cited their rejection of any evidence that wasn't of 6.5 caliber, even though they knew the slits in Kennedy's shirt collar were made by a scalpel
Right.
during emergency procedures.
Okay.
And he pointed out that they knew the Dallas curbstone that was scarred by the shot that injured James Tigg had been patched, but pretended otherwise, still claiming Nick was there.
So they were deliberately misleading the public. Why would they do that?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
Weisberg believed they were protecting someone or something.
Right.
Maybe they were afraid of what the truth would reveal, or maybe they were just incompetent.
It's hard to believe that such a high-profile investigation could be so flawed.
But that's what Weisberg and many other researchers have concluded.
Right.
The official investigations were plagued by errors, omissions, and deliberate obfuscation.
That's a disturbing thought.
Yeah.
That we may never know the full truth about what happened in Dallas.
It is, but that doesn't mean we should stop searching.
Right.
As Weisberg said in his letter to Dvoretsky, you did a good thing by challenging the official narrative.
So what you're saying is that even though it's been decades, the JFK assassination is still an open case.
Absolutely.
There's still evidence to be analyzed, witnesses to be interviewed, and questions to be answered.
Absolutely. And groups like Dealey Plaza UK are playing a vital role in keeping that search for truth alive.
Right. Yeah, it's incredible how much new information and analysis is still coming out about the JFK assassination after all these years.
Yeah, it's a testament to how much this event has resonated with people. You know, it's not just a historical curiosity. It's like a wound that hasn't fully healed.
Yeah, and one of the most, I think, intriguing aspects of it is the question of motive.
Right.
Why was Kennedy killed? Who benefited from his death? And this issue of the Dealey Plaza Echo includes an article that tackles this very question.
Oh, okay.
It's by Barry Keene, and it's titled The Vexed Question.
Okay.
So Keene starts by pointing out that even if you believe Oswald acted alone, the Warren Commission's explanation for his motives is pretty weak.
Right.
They list things like resentment of authority and a desire for fame.
Right.
But it all feels very speculative.
Yeah, it's like they're just throwing darts at a board hoping something sticks.
Right.
There's no clear, compelling reason why this seemingly insignificant young man would assassinate the president of the United States.
Right, exactly. So Keene takes a step back and kind of looks at the bigger picture and examines these various groups that might have had a motive to eliminate Kennedy.
Like who?
Well, his list is pretty extensive.
Okay.
It includes the CIA, Lyndon B. Johnson, J. Edgar Hoover, the Mafia, anti-Castro Cubans, segregationists, hawks in the military, big business in general, and oil bosses specifically.
So a lot of potential enemies.
It's starting to sound like one of those conspiracy theory movies where everyone's a suspect.
Right, yeah.
But I mean, in a case like this, you have to consider all possibilities.
Absolutely.
And Keene does a good job of laying out the potential motives of each group. And he delves into two key areas of conflict that could provide motives. Kennedy's clashes with the CIA. And then his challenge to the Federal Reserve.
Right. So we were talking earlier about Kennedy trying to rein in the CIA after the Bay of Pigs. He wanted to limit their power. Which obviously didn't sit well with some people within the agency.
Exactly. And then there was this whole, confrontation with the Federal Reserve. Keene explains how Kennedy, through Executive Order 11 and 10, authorized the Treasury to issue silver certificates.
Wow.
Which essentially bypassed the Federal Reserve's control over the money supply.
So he was taking on two of the most powerful institutions in the world.
Yeah, I mean, talk about a power move. It could have had major consequences.
Very risky.
Incredibly risky, So Keene argues that by challenging both the CIA and the Federal Reserve, Kennedy made himself a target of some very dangerous people.
A very dangerous game he was playing.
Yeah, I mean, it's a chilling thought.
It is.
That the President of the United States could be assassinated for trying to assert his authority and challenge the status quo.
It certainly raises questions about who really holds the power in this country. It makes you wonder how many other leaders throughout history have met similar fates for similar reasons.
It does, yeah. Okay, so we've covered Garrison's investigation, the acoustics evidence, the potential motives.
Right.
I mean, this issue of the Dealey Plaza Echo is packed with intriguing material.
It really is.
But there's one more article I want to talk about.
Okay.
It's about a British intelligence officer named Alan Crick.
Oh, yeah, that's a fascinating little side story.
Yeah, it's written by Mark Bridger, and it's titled Alan Crick, a special copy of the Warren Report.
Okay.
So the article reveals that when Crick left his post at the British Embassy in Washington in 1965, Alan Dulles gave him signed copies of his book, The Craft of Intelligence.
Wow.
And the Warren Report.
Interesting.
Dulles, of course, was the former CIA director who headed the Warren Commission. And Crick, with his wartime experience and his work with the British Joint Services Mission in Washington, was clearly a respected figure in the intelligence community.
Right, so it sounds like just a friendly gesture.
Yeah, like a friendly gesture between colleagues.
Between colleagues?
But there's a twist.
What's that?
The article mentions that Crick had handwritten notes in the margins of the Warren Report.
Oh, really?
Especially next to sections about Oswald's interrogations and the actions of the Dallas police.
Wow, so a seasoned intelligence officer was skeptical of the official narrative.
Yeah, it seems that way.
Interesting. What kind of notes did he write?
Well, the article doesn't go into specifics.
Okay.
But, Crick's extensive experience in interrogation suggests that he might have spotted some inconsistencies or red flags in the Warren Commission's account.
Right. He was probably reading between the lines, seeing things that the average person might miss.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder what his conclusions were. Did he believe Oswald acted alone, or did he suspect something more sinister was at play?
Right, yeah.
Unfortunately, we may never know.
Yeah.
But it's these little details, these glimpses behind the curtain that keep the JFK assassination so fascinating.
Absolutely. They remind us that there's always more to the story than what we're initially told.
Right.
And they inspire us to keep digging, to keep asking questions, and to never take anything at face value.
And that's what the Dealey Plaza Echo is all about, right?
Yeah.
Challenging the official narrative and encouraging people to think critically about this pivotal event in history.
Exactly. They're not afraid to ask tough questions and explore alternative theories.
Yeah.
And that's what makes their work so valuable.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
We've really kind of explored the dark side of the JFK assassination through the lens of this British research journal. We delved into the alleged CIA connections of Clay Shaw, the questionable tactics used against Jim Garrison, the controversial acoustics evidence, the potential motives behind the assassination, and even that intriguing story of a British intelligence officer who might have doubted the Warren report.
It's been a fascinating journey, and I hope it's inspired you to do some digging of your own.
I know I've got a lot to think about.
Yeah.
This case is like a bottomless pit of intrigue and mystery.
It really is.
And I have a feeling we'll be talking about it for many years to come.
There's no doubt about that. The JFK assassination is one of those historical events that will continue to captivate and challenge us.
Right.
It's a story that's still being written.
And who knows what new revelations await us in the years to come, you know? Maybe one day we'll finally have all the answers, but until then, the search for truth continues.
And that's the beauty of it. The journey is just as important as the destination.
Well said. Well said. Thanks for joining me on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
It's been truly an enlightening experience.
The pleasure was all mine.